So I was talking to a former IRS auditor back in the day, and he said sole proprietors, which means you just don't set up a business, but you're doing business, right? No corporation. 400% higher chance of being audited. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. Are you wanting to start a business or maybe even invest in real estate? Well, what's the best way to protect yourself and maximize your tax savings? When does it make sense to set up a corporation, and what type of corporation is right for you? These are the kind of questions we're getting, Stova. Let's go.
We're going to dive into AJ's question.
All right.
He says, first, I just want to say I love your YouTube channel and podcast. Keep up the amazing work.
You know, that flattery works with me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
I
love it too.
I like it.
Thanks, AJ. He says, my question for you is, after working 8 years in my family's restaurant where we do just under $1 million per year gross, it is now time for my father to retire and for me to take the business over. That's exciting.
Nice.
I'm in between setting up an LLC or an S corporation. My passion is real estate, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity of owning this business. So my ultimate goal is to build a real estate portfolio that I will one day be able to pass down to my children. How would you set up this entity to make the most sense as a funding source for my real estate investing? Thanks so much for your time and consideration. What advice would you give AJ in this situation?
So I was talking to a former IRS auditor back in the day, and he said sole proprietors, which means you just don't set up a business, but you're doing business, right? No corporation. 400% higher chance of being audited.
Wow.
So just reducing that is kind of nice to set up a corporation. The second thing is setting up a corporation allows you to have certain protections where you limit your liability. If you're a sole proprietor, you have unlimited liability on the individual. When you set up a corporation, you can limit that liability. So it actually creates a bit of protection for you. So that's an important piece.
Yeah. So what are the different types of corporations that AJ can consider? We know LLC is a pretty common one.
LLC is the most common one. It kind of came out in the late 70s out of Wyoming. It's the new kid on the block when it comes to corporations. And it's a beautiful corporation for partnerships. So if you're not going to be the sole owner, because it has a lot of flexibility. Now, it's a pass-through entity, which means when you earn an income in that, even if you don't take the income out of the corporation, it passes on to your personal taxes. So you can't just retain the earnings and be like, oh, I'll pay taxes on that next year. It's a pass-through entity. So is an S corporation. Works similar that way. But an S corporation's a little bit more rigid and not as flexible. So if you have a partner in an S corporation, it kind of tells you based upon the percentages what the distributions have to be. Where in an LLC, I could be like, you know what? Stova's doing better with this money nerds thing, so I want to pay her more if we're a partner, and I could do that. In an S corp, if we're doing a distribution, it's outlined in the ownership of the corporation.
Okay.
But an S corporation's amazing when you're just the only person in that business and you want to make it a cash cow. You're just going to take as much money as you can from it. It's really good to differentiate your income, where you can take a salary and you can take distributions, and those distributions can avoid self-employment tax. Okay, so that's where an S corp. Not a lot of S corps I see in real estate.
Okay.
With real estate investing, LLC is very popular. Now there's also C corporations. More complex real estate structures I've seen in C corporations, and with holding companies, I've seen C corporations, especially if you're raising funds. A lot of times you can have different classes of shares. C corporations can retain earnings. They can, say, hey, we're just going to hold on to this money. We're not distributing it this year, and you're not paying tax until it's distributed. But there's tax on the way in, the corporate tax, and then the individual tax on the way out. C corporations actually have a lower tax rate for the first $50,000 of income for a lot of people, though. Now, most real estate's going to be held in an LLC. That's just going to be the most common thing that you see. And I don't really care if you have a partner in real estate if it's being held in an LLC. That's not really a big deal. But if you get into more complex structures, you'll see general partnerships and limited partnerships in real estate, because there's different liability factors. There might be people raising funds versus people who are actively managing those things. I don't really think that's a situation we have here. And so you don't hear me talk much about general or limited partnerships.
No, I haven't.
Just because I don't do a lot of real estate investing anymore. I used to back in the day, and I definitely don't raise funds, but it's usually for a little bit more complex structure. So the simplest thing to look at is probably the LLC at this point.
Okay. So when he's looking at the entity that he wants to go with, does it matter how much revenue is coming in? If he's making above $50,000, is an S corp a good idea, or how?
The S corp could be a good idea for the restaurant business if he's going to be the sole owner.
Okay.
Could be great. right? For real estate, probably not so much. And one of the considerations, and this might be a little too early, but is to have a holding company that owns his interest in the LLCs for the real estate and owns his interest in the S Corp for the restaurant business. But if you're not making any money, to set that up too early is probably overkill, and you don't want that additional complexity. But as time goes on, if you start getting 5 real estate properties or 10 real estate properties, what's nice is you have a holding company that owns that LLC that owns the properties in it. It kind of helps from a tax perspective too, because it could kind of simplify filing. And then that holding company could then own the S corporation for the restaurant business, separating out liability, having kind of one major entity. But I would say restaurant business, consider the S corp, LLC for the for the real estate. But let me be really clear: I'm not an attorney.
Yes,
and it's so important to consult an attorney that can dive really deep into your situation and understand what your objectives are versus just one static question. So you'll want to have that conversation with an attorney. And I always feel like it's important to pay attorneys versus just download an LLC or pay a fee for that. Because if you ever get into trouble, you need to have an attorney represent you. And what happens if the LLC, the operating agreement, didn't say things properly, or the ownership things didn't happen when things got deeded over? Like, have a great attorney. It's worth it.
100%. Yes. So the second part to his question was he's wanting to pass down some of this to his children. So you talk a lot about legacy, what that means to protect and perpetuate wealth. Do you want to share some of your thoughts on what that looks like, not just for a real estate or a restaurant business, but for anybody who wants to make sure that their children are, taken care of and are also being thriving adults. Right.
And one other entity just to know about and consider is known as a family limited partnership. Now, these got abused for a while, because what could happen is, let's say, I've got 2 kids and I go, well, I'm going to own 1% of the family limited partnership. I'm going to have my wife own 1%. Then we're going to have my kids own 98%. But if my kids aren't active at all or doing anything for the real estate business, then it kind of negates the real purpose of that entity. And we saw there was times that people were doing this just for asset protection and for a way to be more efficient with how they pass on their wealth. And some of them got under attack and they lost. Yeah. So it has to be done right with the right attorney. For me, I like that I have a holding company that's actually integrated into my estate plan. It's called the Domestic Asset Protection Trust. And that's the holding company that then owns all the other entities. And so the estate plan's inside of that, and it's super helpful on how I'm going to pass down wealth, because I don't want to just give my kids money, and I don't just want to give them property. I want to give them opportunity. I want them to live with passion and to pursue their purpose. I want them to have a family bank that they could pay interest to, so that we're earning it versus the other institutions. So for legacy, for me, it's all about the time I'm spending with them now. The lessons that we could learn along the way. How can I invest in them so they could develop their skill sets and be able to be, human beings that go out there and love the life versus, just getting money from me because they probably aren't going to get off their butts if that's what happens, Yeah. And I like them to get innovative about it. So,
yeah. Well, I think one book that people could check out is What Would Billionaires Do? And we can put the link in the show notes for everyone who's interested in learning about legacy and family.
Billionairemethod.com.
Okay.
I believe we'll verify that 100%.
Yeah. We'll just put it in the show notes. So just look below and you'll see it there.
Yeah, 'cause it's a great way to start capturing some money. Great if you're going to buy real estate, where you can then use cash to buy the real estate. It's great on how you perpetuate that wealth and some of the Rockefeller method that's illustrated throughout that book. So good call. Yeah. They do have to buy the book, but it's pretty inexpensive. I'm making it very affordable, right? I'm making it extraordinarily affordable. So, that's something to kind of dive into. Anything else, or am I ready to sign off?
Let's see. I think we're ready to sign off. I think we covered everything in AJ's question today.
All right. Check out What Would Billionaires Do? This is Garrett Gunderson. Remember, turn your thoughts into profits and build the life you love.